The Indian government has made its position very clear. This could perhaps be a case of conspiracy, and if that's the case, then should not the US apologize and not express regret? That's our debate tonight. Mahroof Raza, strategic affairs expert, joining us in the Delhi studio. Parthasarthy, former diplomat, joining us from Ahmedabad. Veena Sikri, former diplomat, joining us from the Delhi studio. Lord Meghnad Desai, an eminent economist, joining us from Goa, as well as Kurt Volker, former US ambassador to NATO, live from Washington, D.C., is also joining with us. Thank you very much. Mahroof, my first question to you. The way you look at this entire story developing, what can you make of this entire development? Do you feel that, the way India is registering its protest with the United States, obviously something somewhere has gone wrong, to say the least?
Well, from all the evidence that's available to us through the media, it's quite clear that this has been an orchestrated exercise on the part of the maid and her family. And for them, America is the big apple, and they've had this opportunity to go there and make a case, and unfortunately put a very capable Indian diplomat in the dock. What is worrying to me is this whole issue of how America is taking its time to respond. I mean, you brought out the issue about there's only the simple word of regret. But please remember that America takes a long, long time, if at all, to apologize. In recent memory, last year, when they killed 24 Pakistani soldiers on the Afpak border by an airstrike, Pakistan did everything possible, blockaded NATO convoys, but you still didn't get an apology from America. Or in a larger historical perspective, America killed millions of Japanese in bombings in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but even in the various anniversaries of those bombings, they got Japan to apologize for the atrocities that the Japanese troops had conducted in World War II, but there wasn't an apology from America, whether for the bombing of the Japanese, or using napalm bombs in Vietnam, or for using city bombings in Europe during World War II.
Right.
So I don't think you're going to get an apology from America. What we need to do is realistically understand how America-India relationship is now poised, and have we really gained from the so-called strategic partnership, or have we lost out in Afghanistan? Have we lost out in Iran? Have we lost out by giving them $9 billion plus dollars worth of defense deals?
Let's come back to this issue, Mahroof.
So there are a lot of issues.
Yes,
and I think
Mahroof,
this is the time for
let's just come back to the point of debate here. And the idea is it's looking increasingly clear that it's a conspiracy. Even our foreign minister has said that. Let's ask Mr. Kurt Volker, why is America batting so much for a maid who had a non-bailable warrant issued against her, who had her passport revoked in July 2013 and was allowed to stay on illegally in the US?
Well, let's stipulate a couple things. First off, I think America made some terrible mistakes going along here, has handled this inappropriately and badly, both in the time before this arrest was made, when more could have been done to resolve this in a proper way, and also in the arrest itself. So let's be clear, this has not been handled well at all. Let's also drop the word conspiracy. I don't think there's any effort on the part of the United States government to create a case and to build a conspiracy. This is more a case of an accusation of a crime from the maid and an investigation of that crime, and then an arrest on that basis. And I don't know the merits of this case either against the maid or for the maid. That's something that needs to be investigated. But I do agree that the way that this has been handled has missed a lot of opportunities for the U.S. and India to work together on things that we both care about, which is the fair treatment of labor and also the appropriate protections of people such as diplomats or consular officers, and ways to work together as two countries to solve a problem when one comes up.
Well, Mr. Volker, if you allow me, I'd just like to make a quick rebuttal. You're talking about American laws. You're talking about how appropriately it's been handled purely on a legal basis. But it is going to open a Pandora's box, because a lot of American diplomats who serve overseas, look at their cases in India. And this is the point I've made earlier on Newshour also, that if American embassies are regarded rightly so as American territory, than those they employ in American territory of ethnic origin in India, are they being paid the minimum wages that you would expect them to be paid in the United States? Your diplomats are getting fat salaries out here. They're getting hardship allowances out here. Why are they then paying them slave wages here? So I think there is a discrepancy, and you're expecting the Indian diplomat to pay this maid higher than what she's earning herself. I mean, this is bizarre. So clearly, whether it's not a State Department conspiracy, I stand with you on that score, but I think there are some lower level functionaries who've gone over the top.
Walker's response on this. Yes, Mr. Walker.
First off, so I wasn't limiting my concerns about the way this has been handled only to the legal issues. I think the way that she was treated individually did carry indignity towards her as a person, and I think that's a grave mistake. And I don't think that should be the case. Secondly, in terms of American diplomats abroad, having been one myself, I know that the U.S. government requires its overseas diplomatic personnel to live within the laws of the countries where they are residing. So it is both U.S. law and living up to the laws of those countries. Now, it's not to say that they're punishable under those laws, but it's a requirement that's imposed by our own government on our own diplomats. In this case, since she was not in a diplomatic status but in a consular status, it's slightly different. But that's not the main point. The main point is that we should have worked with India, with the mission in the UN, with the consul general, in order to resolve this in a way, if there was a problem, get it investigated, get it fixed in a way that shows cooperation between our countries, rather than what I would argue is just mismanagement, letting this issue just spin out of control to the point where U.S. Marshals get involved, arrest the woman, and now we have a big mess to clean up that should never have happened.
No, not just that, Mr. Walker. This admission on the side and what will be done now on the side. But Mr. Parthasarthy, the fact is she was employed under the Deputy Consul General of India. She was working on behalf of the Indian government. And it's not that she has not followed protocol. The Indian embassy also has written to the US State Department and to follow up. And it's a huge chain that you see, and there has been no response. So isn't that a violation of the US laws itself by some people within the US administration?
Yeah, I don't think it's a violation of laws of people within the administration, no. I do think that there's a dispute over whether it was diplomatic or consular immunity that applies. There's a difference under the Vienna Convention. But again, that's a technicality.
No, Mr. Walker, I'm not talking about what was done with Sangeeta Richard. I put that question to Mr. Parthasarthy. He has a point to make, so I'll just go across to him and then I'll come back to you. Okay. It is about what the embassy wrote to the US Department and the lack of response that came over 6 months between June and as late as September.
Let me tell Mr. Ambassador Walker, a highly respected diplomat, that the US action of dictating to foreign missions what they should pay citizens of their own citizens is not valid under the UN Convention of 1963, the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations. Please read Article 47. Entire question regarding employment or by a consular officer in terms of Article 47 is to be determined by the consular officer concerned. The host government has no say in what we pay for people we employ from our country. I mean, we will not ask the US what they pay an American in India. This is point number one. And they are in clear contravention by that requirement of violating Article 47 of the UN Convention, of the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations. And I've studied it. The second point I wish to make on the conspiracy.
Okay.
I don't hold the State Department responsible for this. There is this overzealous Uncle Tom, an Indian, who goes by the name of Preet Bharara. Yeah. Now he is the man who seems to have connived in all this, and worse still, he has sought to undermine the workings of the Indian High Court, which had placed an indictment on this lady for misusing an official passport by arranging for her family to come to the United States. Now that is a conspiracy. The first thing we need to do is that what Barara has done, and is a New York attorney, is a violation of Indian law. It is a criminal violation. And I think a contempt of court notice needs to be served on him through the State Department. And I think at the same time, the Interpol should be informed worldwide that we have served this legal notice on this gentleman. Now, coming to this issue itself, this is going to take time to resolve, but India must not relent. Till we get back the lady's passport, till at least there is an apology for the people who treated her the way they did. As the ambassador says, I'm willing to go along with it, that, this is not something the State Department did, but then the people who did it,
Mr. Parthasarthy,
violating every
this is a crucial
norm of
point that you have made.
Conduct.
Okay,
Yeah,
Mr. Parthasarthy, the point that you have made, you've gotten a third dimension here, is about an overzealous US attorney. I'll come across to you. Let's quickly.
If they don't, just a minute, don't interrupt me. When we serve such a notice, if they don't apologize, then at least they reserve a reprimand from the federal government for their action. That is a form of atonement. So I'm looking at it through.
Okay, Lord Meghnad Desai.
Either the cops who did this apologize, or there is atonement from the to the US government, to federal government, conveyed to us. Nothing short of that is going to work.
Okay,
but
atonement from the US government to be conveyed to India. That's what Parthasarthy is saying. Lord Meghnad Desai. Mr. Parthasarthy, I'll come across to you. Lord Meghnad Desai, getting you into this debate. I mean, the point that Mr. Parthasarthy is making is well taken. But the other point here is the stoic, studied silence of the US establishment. This matter was first brought, Ms. Sikri, in June 2013. And there was no communication from the United States. This matter on various points was highlighted by the Indian establishment about the maid. Assistance in tracing Dr. Khobragade's domestic assistant, Sangeeta Richard, an Indian citizen who entered the US with an official passport, was found missing on 23rd of June. Action against blackmailing by Ms. Richard, demanding that she be permitted to change her passport, visa status, and to work elsewhere, which would be in violation of US regulations. Apart from this, arresting of Ms. Richard, who has taken cash, mobile phone, documents from the residence of Dr. Khobragade. Now, Lord Meghnad Desai, it's also this studied and stoic silence of the US establishment on all these counts.
I think what has happened is that had Sangeeta Richard stayed in Khobragade's employment, the Vienna Convention Clause 47 would have been satisfied. But she ran away because she claimed ill treatment. She's obviously gone to an NGO which has protected her. And because wage slavery is a serious offense in American law, the argument has been made. I have read the entire legal case filed against Devyani Khobragade, and the entire legal case says that the wage she was promised, 30,000 rupees a month, amounts to $3.30 per hour, which is way below minimum wage. Indian authorities knew it because in a visa application form, a wage 9 times that, $4,500, was entered. And this means that the government of India knew that this is what they had to pretend to American government they're paying. They were not going to pay that. Now again, had she stayed in collusion...
Well, Lord Meghnad Desai,
Lord Desai...
But hang on, but she ran away. Let me finish.
Lord Desai...
She ran away and went to an NGO. There are a lot of NGOs in America which look after human trafficking, we look after wage
But
slavery,
Lord Desai, that's the point of the debate, isn't it?
Hang on.
No, you have read the case, but that case is one-sided. Because the US attorney, Mr. Preet Bharara, and the prosecutor
has lied on the visa application form. Lied on the visa application form about the wage, and her
she signed it, isn't it? And the US immigration officials also gave her the visa, didn't it? She also signed another contract as per which. And why did not Mr. Bharara get in touch and get the details from the other side too? Because Devyani's sister today has put out the proof. Ms. Veena Sikri, you would have got the details. Where Devyani's sister.
This happens before Mr. Bharara.
But
this is before Mr. Bharara.
But the fact is, she was was missing.
This
The
is
Indian
Mr.
embassy had
Can
said
you
that she is
listen to
missing.
me?
The US department
Can
didn't
you
bother to
please
trace her.
listen to
Her passport was revoked, but she was still allowed to stay on. So these were things which the US department also did. See, it's all looking at you're supposed to look at the entire case from both sides, isn't it? And she was being paid a wage of 30,000 rupees per month. That amount was being transferred to her husband's account in Delhi. She was being paid dollars in cash, for which there are receipts. Yes, Ms. Sikri.
Yes, in fact, the visa application submitted by the domestic assistant, Sangeeta Richard, stated clearly that she was going to get 30,000 rupees a month, and that the diplomatic officer's wage was around 4,000 or 4,500 rupees a month. So that visa application was submitted to the Americans, and on that basis she got a visa. So the Americans knew the wage that was going to be given to her, and they accepted it.
Why did they accept it?
At that point, having said that, why did they accept it? The second point is that it is most unusual that once she runs away from the employ of the diplomatic officer, she is then an illegal immigrant.
Absolutely.
And as an illegal immigrant in the US, instead of being charged for that, she is being given a visa, and her family is being invited with a visa.
Now, Mr. Walker,
this is most unusual, you know.
Don't you understand what the conspiracy angle here is all about? This is exactly what people feel results into what we call a conspiracy.
Yes, but I would like to also say
I understand what you're saying, but it's wrong.
Yes, Mr. Walker.
Let me tell Lord Desai.
So first off, the woman,
both Veena Sikri and I,
the maid is viewed as a victim. And so, as a victim, under our laws and systems, she should be protected.
But that's the point, Mr. Walker. Mr. Parthasarthy, just give me 10 seconds.
Looked at before.
Just give me 30 seconds.
Mr.
Walker,
you know the officer. You have to consult the Indian government on that. That's the first premise of the Vienna Convention, and that was not done. Even the Foreign Secretary was in Washington, and the Foreign Secretary was not consulted about this. Secondly, in keeping with India's friendship with the US, the importance of the relationship, the strategic partnership, all this merits a complete bilateral discussion before this is thrown into the public domain and the diplomatic officer is treated like an ordinary criminal. I think this is what has
and
really...
Ms. Sikri and Mahroof, even if we were to talk purely on the basis of what is the written word, that is the Vienna Convention. Article 47 is the article that you were referring to in previous shows also. Would you like to elaborate on that?
Yes.
What does that actually mean?
Yes, Article 47 of the 1963 Convention says quite clearly that members of the private staff of consular officers and of consular employees shall, if they do not carry on any other gainful occupation in the receiving state, be exempt from the obligations referred to above, which includes work permits or laws and regulations of the receiving state concerning the employment of foreign labor. So actually, as long as she was there and in keeping with the application made, these laws are not applicable to the domestic assistance of consular and diplomatic employees. Consular employees fall very much under this category.
Yes, Mr. Parthasarthy.
Between consular and diplomatic employees.
Veena Sikri is spot on. Veena is spot on. Both Veena and I were together in the United States. This is a charade. Every State Department official knows precisely what we pay, what every other developing country pays. They also know that enforcing it is hazardous because it runs contrary to Article 47 of the Vienna Convention. And then they start all this tamasha of being great human rights people. Human rights organizations. But here I come back to the basic. I think it is important that the chief conspirator in this, Preet Bharara, should have an Interpol notice on him. Formally with the State Department, he should be charged, and very clearly they should be told, okay, you guys, you are not responsible, as the ambassador says, then let the police and the other detention authorities give a formal apology. As for Lord Desai's argument, I don't think he served in Washington. Veena and I have. We know what the score is when it comes to developing countries.
Okay. Absolutely. In fact, Mahroof, if I could just take you through the statement of the Manhattan US Attorney, Mr. Preet Bharara. He gives a point-by-point rebuttal. It almost appears, Mahroof, as if he is trying to defend his own decision, or give out a statement defending his own self, rather than this particular case. On 1, 2, 3, 4, at least 6 counts where he's trying to defend the decision that he has taken. Do you think it's a fair defense? I mean, you must have gone through the defense that he has made.
Well, yes. I think there are 2 issues that I want to bring out, other than what the 2 distinguished High Commissioners, Mr. Parthasarthy and Madam Sikri, have brought out. First is that as far as Mr. Preet Bharara is concerned, the word is out that he has his personal ambitions which are going far in excess of the role that he is currently playing. And those who know that he is targeting even higher office, and Indians are being made a scapegoat by him. The second point that I want to make is that if you read the American response to the Vienna Conventions, they are in fact far in excess of what the Vienna Conventions offer, which clearly says that while America is a signatory to the Vienna Conventions, it is also saying in the same word and letter and spirit that our laws are superior to that international convention that we are signatories to. And you can see this in 2 cases. Recently, the Raymond Davis case in Pakistan, the distinguished American ambassador was just saying that, if she was a consular employee, then the terms and engagement are different than a diplomatic employee. I would like to ask you, sir, why was Raymond Davis first a consular employee and then quickly given a status of a diplomatic status so that he could be extradited from Pakistan under diplomatic immunity? There are 2 separate statements that have come out from your State Department which have changed his status over a period of 48 hours. And look at more specifically that America has one set of rules for itself, another set of rules for a lot of other countries it deals with.
Right.
Am I wrong in stating that a number of third world countries that have missions in America can't even afford to pay for their mission offices? How are they going to pay for staff? America is allowing them to be present out there because some would argue that they help America garner votes at the United Nations. Now, these are very blunt questions, sir. Can I get your answers, please?
Mr. Walker.
Right. So I think the case of Ray Davis that you raised, I think that he was accused of a crime in Pakistan. He acted as the U.S. saw it in self-defense, and the U.S. did, as you say, quickly move him to a different status and out of the country. And there was a great deal of lack of confidence in the fairness of the execution of Pakistani law. And I think that's a fact, and I don't dispute what you're saying. I think another case that's worth remembering is the case of the IMF Managing Director, Dominique Strauss-Kahn, who was accused of raping a woman in a hotel. And he was arrested by authorities in New York because that was not in any way connected to his official duties. That was settled out of court, but he also was disgraced by those actions. When it comes to the case of the Indian Deputy Consul General in New York, let me just say that I think there are 4 issues that we have to keep in mind. One of them is probably the most important, which is her treatment as an individual. And I think that was not handled well at all. The second issue is the accusation of a crime being committed. We don't know the facts. We know some of the facts. We don't know all of them. And it's important that the investigation of a crime be carried out. The third issue is the legal status of diplomatic immunity, consular immunity, following labor laws in the U.S., or perhaps lying on a visa application. These are legal issues between governments that need to be sorted out. There's differing interpretations there. We could also have done a far better job in managing those issues before it blew up. And then the fourth issue, and I believe perhaps the long-term important one, as many of your other guests have said too, this is something that should have been brought up between the foreign ministries of the 2 countries. It should have been worked cooperatively with the Indian embassy in Washington, with the Indian mission in New York, in order to handle this as 2 responsible countries rather than let it get out of hand in this way.
Mr. Walker,
so those 4 issues need to be separated but understood.
Mr. Walker, your point's taken. The thing is, this is your point of view. When will the US government acknowledge this? And why hasn't it acknowledged it yet? The second question,
right.
why did Mr. Preet Bharara jump the gun? Why didn't he listen to both sides of the stories before he formed his opinion? Thirdly, Why did he oversee a Delhi High Court injunction and also a non-bailable warrant issued against Sangeeta Richard? And why did he mock the Indian judicial system? Another question. If the maid was being ill-treated, why did she write a letter and pen it down that she was very, very happy? Her work hours were very, very comfortable. She was being treated like a house person or a family, not as a domestic help. If she has made all these notings in March or in April, in fact, 1 month before she has absconded. So how could things change suddenly? Why has the US prosecutor or the US attorney not bothered to go through the facts before he's mocked the Indian judicial system and also broken laws?
Right. So I think the first thing is that the U.S. government
I
will
want
be
to
very
ask
slow
the
to
ambassador.
comment.
If I may ask the ambassador one more query. One more query to the ambassador. Does he think it is befitting of a U.S. attorney to pass derogatory comments about the judicial system of a fellow democracy, which President Obama has said is the largest democracy in the world? Don't you think you should rein in these guys?
Right. Yeah, well, let's go through. There's several questions that were just raised. So first off, the U.S. government as a government will be very slow to react and issue any kind of statement or apology. As another guest indicated earlier, there's a desire on the part of government officials to make sure whatever they say is absolutely based on fact, absolutely accurate, no risk of getting it wrong. And it takes a very long time to really get to the bottom of anything. So they'll be very slow. We've seen in the case of U.S. ambassador and others, diplomats killed in Benghazi, no one has yet been held accountable for that. No, there's been no clear investigation of that inside the U.S. government even, let alone in a case such as this that's only a week or so old. So it's just going to be very slow. Secondly, I absolutely agree. I think that there should have been more investigation and more cooperation between India and the United States before it came to the point of an arrest like this. The reason that I suppose, and this is my judgment, I don't know if this is a fact, but the reason that I suppose that that didn't happen was because the maid herself was viewed as a victim and therefore needing protection, and therefore an investigation should proceed on that basis rather than accepting the word of the people she's accusing of having treated her unfairly. I think that is just a bias. I shouldn't say bias even, but it's a fact in our system.
Meghnad Desai.
Victims are often powerless, and we try to give a favorable
But that's the fallacy of all of it, because she was not the victim in this. The only victim, like our Foreign Affairs Foreign Ministry spokesperson said. Like Syed Akbaruddin, our spokesperson of the Ministry of External Affairs, said, the only victim in this case is Dr. Devyani Khobragade. There is nobody else. And that is the truth. And that's not been pursued and that's been overlooked. Lord Meghnad Desai, you've been silent for a bit. Yes, sir.
Well, may I say that may be the truth,
another victim,
and I actually think it might be the truth, but that's what needs to be investigated and found out.
From
We jumped the gun by
home
acting as we
and
did.
complain about ill treatment. That is why she is with a human rights NGO and they have taken up her case. And because she has complained and her complaint has been found to be valid, that the US District Attorney has filed the case. He doesn't do it for fun, nor does he do it for
God's sake, Lord Desai,
he's an officer of the law.
What are you talking?
Lord Meghnad Desai
Found to be
in
guilty?
violation of the law.
Did the NGO speak to the officer concerned? Did the NGO see the letter written by the servant saying she is totally happy?
But she wrote it when she was in employment. Obviously she had to write it. Obviously she had to write it.
She has written it in her personal diary, Lord Meghnad Desai. She has not written it at gunpoint. She has not written it at gunpoint.
She was a slave worker.
She has not written it at gunpoint.
She was being paid slave wages.
There has been no proof that's been produced to prove this claim, but there is proof, handwritten proof, that she has said that she is happy.
You only care about the rights of one Indian citizen.
Just a minute. Dr. Desai, Lord Desai, you're calling it slave wages. Just a minute. Lord Desai, you've called it slave wages. How much do you pay your servants? How much do you pay your drivers? In India, she gets a better wage than that. So don't try and run down somebody just because you have the title of a lord.
I cannot afford a full-time servant in London. I'm not that rich.
No, Lord
My
servant
servant in
it
London
is not
only
30,000
No, I'm talking
rupees
of
a
in
month.
India.
30,000
I'm
rupees
talking
a
in
month.
India.
Plus a few hundred dollars in cash is not slave wages.
How much do you
And there is
pay an
proof for
Indian
that.
servant in
Ask me
India?
a question, let
Anand,
me
just a
answer it.
moment. Ms. Sikri wants to come in.
If you
I
ask
think
me a
there is
question
one point,
about the
an
wages
important
I pay,
point that is
let me
being,
answer it.
completely looked over.
Don't interrupt.
By the fact of we are arguing about
Okay.
how much money she got and how much money Lord Meghnad
I am
Desai
answering
paid
this
servants.
question or
but
I'm
the
not.
point is
If
that
I'm not
in the
answering the question,
interest
thank
of
you very
good-
much. I'll go home to bed.
Yeah, Ms.
Thank you
Sikri,
very
just
much.
wait a minute. Yes, Lord Desai,
That's
complete.
it.
Yes, and then we'll
Good
go to
night.
Ms. Sikri. Yes, Lord
Good
Meghnad
night.
Desai. Yes, Lord Meghnad Desai, complete.
I would suggest the next time Lord Desai takes an Indian taxi, he pays the same fees that he pays in London.
Lord Meghnad Desai,
What
complete.
rubbish he's talking.
Complete, sir, complete. Sir, make your point. Lord Desai, make your point.
Thank you very much.
Lord
Very
Desai,
nice
make
to
your
be here.
point. Lord Meghnad Desai, do make your point.
I was just saying that I pay my maid servant in London £12 an hour. She only comes for 5 hours a week because I can't afford a maid servant full time. Indian diplomats, when they go abroad, should realize they can't afford a full-time maid servant if they're going to pay decent wages. Why don't they learn to live like other Americans who don't have full-time maid servants? Why do we pretend that you can have a Delhi standard?
Because you have never been a
Obviously,
diplomat,
you pay
Lord
slave
Desai.
wages.
You have risen to lordship. A diplomat has
thank
to
goodness for
entertain.
that.
A diplomat has to
Thank
look
goodness
after
for
guests. He has to look after
I've never had to
delegations.
lie.
So,
I never had to lie.
and incidentally, what we have done is within the realms of the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations. So get off in defending your
But it's a
friends
violation
across
of
the
US law.
Atlantic.
It's a violation of US law.
The U.S.
On
law.
wages.
I'll tell you what.
No, no, Lord
According
Meghnad
to the
Desai,
Vienna
Lord
Convention
Meghnad
on the
Desai,
law of
the point that
treaties,
you're making is about perhaps a
No, no.
larger mentality. The point that you're
According
making is
to the
perhaps
UN
of a larger
Convention on the
mentality,
law
but
of
this
treaties-
particular case in point, in the term, in the wake of facts, is heavily tilted against your argument.
Because America is a signatory to the Vienna Convention.
No,
so
and not just that.
America being a signatory to the Vienna Convention,
Vienna
it
Convention
specifies
does
clearly
not
where
apply
the
when
Vienna
a woman
Convention
runs
supersedes their
away
laws.
from
No,
employment
Lord Meghnad
and
Desai,
complains
US
to
law
human
doesn't
rights
apply to an Indian
organization
citizen
that her
employed by
rights
the
have been
Deputy Consul
violated.
General of
It's
India.
a human rights issue. It's not a Vienna Convention issue. It's a human rights issue.
it is
a Vienna
not. It is
Convention
not a
issue.
human rights
Wow.
issue.
Rights of
How come you've
Sanket
not
Sorry,
spoken
this
about
is
human
the
rights
utter
when the
rubbish.
US diplomat shot two
It is
Pakistanis
utter rubbish.
repatriated? Where were human rights then, Lord Desai? Why didn't you speak about it then?
Has been treated like that.
Just a minute.
And
Just
she's complained.
a minute.
Come on, answer that question.
Look, she went there of her own will. She signed an agreement with the External Affairs Ministry that she would be given free food, free housing, free medical treatment, air passages, free clothing, and a salary deposited in a bank in India. She went of her will. She wrote
she
in her
still
own
doesn't
diary
have to
that she was
suffer
very happy.
ill-treatment.
Lord
She
Desai, you
doesn't
should do
have
better
to
than that.
suffer
And in
ill-treatment.
any case, India is observing the provisions of a treaty it has signed. The United States is not. Please get that clear before you go jumping around
Human rights,
helping your fellow
human rights are human rights. Human rights are human rights, and nobody should be ill-treated even by their fellow citizens.
Lord Meghnad
even if they're
Desai,
IFS.
Lord Meghnad Desai, which
IFS has
domestic
no
help in
right-
India earns 30,000
no right
rupees
to
per
treat other
month plus
people as less than
$200.
human.
No Indian servant domestic help gets that kind of money, and she was getting it regularly, and there is proof for that.
It's
How can you say it is human rights
ill-treatment.
violation?
It's
How can you say it
ill-treatment.
is human rights violation when she herself
Nobody
has said
should
she
be
is happy?
ill-treated.
She said she doesn't have much work to
Nobody
do.
should be ill-treated. Nobody's human rights should be violated.
Can she prove that
Her
claim?
human
Has she
rights
proved
were
that claim?
violated, which
Has
is
she
what the
proved
case
that
is
claim?
about.
She has
The
spoken
case
Has she
is
proved
about
that claim?
human rights.
Okay, Lord Meghnad
Not about
Desai,
Vienna
getting
Convention.
into-
Well,
Are you
we will see
trying to
what
say
happens
that
in
the
the court
government of
law.
India...
Okay,
Let
Lord
us
Meghnad
wait for the
Desai,
judgment.
Your word
Let us
against
wait for the judgment.
your word against the others, Lord Meghnad
Let us
Desai.
wait
Let's
for
get
the
in
court
Veena
judgment.
Sikri. Veena Sikri, your question to Lord Meghnad Desai.
No, my
I think,
point to Lord
there is-
Meghnad
there is
Desai
one
is a very
similarity.
simple one.
No, let me say. There is one similarity between Lord
Mr. G.
Meghnad
Parthasarthy,
Desai
let's get it-
and Preet
let's get it
Barora.
with Sikri first and then you.
Both
Yes, Ms. Sikri.
both have found Devyani guilty without talking to her.
I think that
This is the problem with Dr.
I think that the whole basis of international relations, the whole basis of relationship between countries is governed by certain conventions. When you are a signatory to the convention, that convention supersedes your national laws.
I've been involved with human rights cases. I've been involved with cases of torture. So I know what happens.
The point I am making is, Lord Meghnad Desai, the point I am making is that when you are a signatory to an international convention like the Vienna Convention, you accept that that convention supersedes your national laws in the specified areas in the convention where you have signed. So that is why in this case, since the Vienna Convention is applicable, there is no violation that has taken place by the diplomatic or the consular officer in this case. It is clearly specified. If there is a perception of a violation, then it needs to be discussed between the states. And that is where the discussion with the State Department comes in. And that is where Preet Bharara's statement is completely silent on one point. It is a defensive statement. It talks entirely about her treatment on par with Americans, but nothing about her status as a diplomat. So that is the problem.
Well, you've got a lot to plead. Lord Meghnad Desai, yes, please. Your response.
This is a question of human rights which overrides all conventions. Universal Declaration of Human Rights overrides all conventions. No convention.
Why is this selectively applicable, Lord Desai? Why is this selectively applicable? Why is this selectively applicable? Why is this selectively applicable?
Tell us so.
Why is this selectively applicable?
I think.
Why are you applying it only in the case of Sangeeta Richard?
Doctor,
and that too without proof, without any facts in place.
The fundamentals of diplomacy.
So isn't Dr. Devyani Khobragade a human being? Is it okay to treat her like that? And then forget about human rights?
And the lower classes. I care about
you can be as animated as you want, Lord Meghnad Desai, but the fact is she has not proved, there is no proof that puts in front that she was ill-treated. But there is enough and more proof that's been put out that she was happy. She herself has stated that, Lord Desai.
I have seen the indictment. Let us wait for the court case.
You have seen only one side of the story and made your decision.
Let the New York court try. Let the New York court try Devyani Khobragade.
Why should New York court try? Because Sangeeta Richard first should be tried in India. She should be brought back because there is a non-bailable warrant against her that was ignored. The Indian judicial system was mocked at. And why was that allowed to do? And why should anybody allow that to do? How can you also say that that was okay to be done? There was a non-bailable warrant against Sangeeta Richard. How was she allowed to be evacuated? And they say they evacuated her. What kind of duress was her family in? Is there any proof to these claims?
Her human rights.
I want to add one thing. Lord Desai, please give me a minute.
Just like you're saying a human rights are violated and treated, let us say that she is not the victim here, Dr. Devyani Khobragade is. I can continue saying that like you are, and I can be all the more animated, Lord Desai. That doesn't make a point. The fact is, we are putting out the facts.
Just a minute.
Talk about the facts. Preet Bharara is making empty statements. He himself says that there are legal cases pending against Sangeeta Richard. And that, despite that, the Indian law, the Indian judicial system was overlooked.
Let justice be done.
Let me say one thing. I am surprised that a member of the House of Lords should be as ignorant of diplomacy as Lord Desai. Lord Desai says that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights overrides every treaty a country signs. Sorry, in terms of international law, a declaration can never override a treaty. Please understand international law before you come to such discussions, Dr. Desai, and don't pontificate.
Ambassador Kurt Volker.
That's the reality of law.
Can I just say one more thing from the U.S. point of view?
Yes, Ambassador Volker.
The U.S. is adhering to the Vienna Convention. Now, there may be some disputes as to how it is applied, but let me give you an example. When I was ambassador to NATO, we had a driver, we had a cook, we had 2 maids, we had a valet, and every single one of them was employed according to Belgian labor law. Now, whether or not you would argue that we had to do that according to the Vienna Convention, as a matter of practice, we had to do that in order to live effectively in Belgium, to have the people there able to exercise their rights. And we didn't object to that as a country. So the Vienna Convention is a foundational document upon which the practice of international relations is built over another 150 some years. In the case of the woman in New York,
may I answer? I'll answer the ambassador. I'll answer the ambassador. It is true that all rich developed countries in Europe employ the locals. Developing countries, including India, cannot afford that. We bring in our own people and pay them according to our rates. So that is true, not just in the United States.
Right.
It is true across Europe. It is true across in
And
Australia, where I was High
is
Commissioner.
that
It's true across the world. Between the developed and developing countries,
issue here that's being
there is this
investigated-
difference in how we conduct diplomacy.
Right. The issue that's being investigated is whether the conditions of the maid's employment were misrepresented to the U.S. government when issuing her visa, because we would not have issued a visa if she was going to be employed in conditions that we would not find legal in the U.S. And so that's what's being checked out.
Absolutely. So where does the
woman,
fault lie?
the maid,
If that was
has
the
made these
argument,
accusations.
Ambassador Walker, where does the fault lie in the first place?
Yeah.
You basically defeated your own
Well,
argument.
the fault would lie
argument of your own
in
country.
issuing, right. If a visa application was misrepresenting the terms of employment, then it would lie with the people who made that misrepresentation. And that's what's being, as I understand, accused and investigated. But again, I'm willing to withhold judgment and say, let's get the facts. There should be an investigation. We should have done a better job up to now, but it
because
still
the
was an
visa could have been
opportunity to
given
get it
on
right.
the basis of the exact facts of the money she was getting, but maybe the visa was given without looking at the, without objecting to the statement of the employer-employee contract that was appended with the visa application.
All right, Mahroof Raza
Or
wanted
maybe
to
this
come.
is
Yes,
common
Mahroof.
practice, Ambassador Walker.
Ambassador,
Or maybe this is common practice, just like you said that you know, Vienna Convention is the bedrock, but you have to respect the laws of some of the countries that you are in. In that way, do the U.S. immigration officials generally turn a blind eye to about the 194 consulates that are there and who have employments? So there is a contract and an affidavit just for the statute, and then there are other contracts that are paid, and everybody knows about it. So if everybody knows about it and everybody is doing it, what did Dr. Devyani Khobragade do wrong?
No, that we've had many cases of
Unmade
diplomats from many countries having employed domestic employees or even enslaved domestic employees that have been investigated and pursued aggressively in the U.S. I'm sure there are cases that have been missed, but the principle is that when we learn about that, we do want to investigate it. The best question, though, is how do you do that? And we've tried to do it by approaching the governments and countries involved to resolve it before it gets to the point of trying to make an arrest.
Yes, but in this case, that was not done. I think that is the basic point in India that has caused so
Exactly.
much hurt. She was treated very poorly without giving her a diplomatic right. And the basic consultation between India and the US, which should have been done, our foreign secretary was in Washington. There could have been direct contact with the ambassador in
And
Washington.
you know,
was not
Mahroof,
done.
there has been a little bit of a history to this. I mean, if you were to look at this case in point, one can perhaps have, various points of view. But what about the cases prior to this case? You have had, our former President, APJ Abdul Kalam, then, of course, Mr. Hardeep Puri, who was subjected to a pat-down.
even George Fernandez
George
as defense
Fernandez,
minister.
there's a history to the way America is treating Indian citizens.
Ambassador, sir, you've very ably defended the American position, but I think, the ground reality is a bit different. And the ground reality is that, America's wanting to engage with countries like India, as Mr. Parthasarthy has rightly brought out, that the salary wages paid in India as compared to your earning, your per capita income, your ability to pay in the United States is completely at variance with a country like India. Now, if this is the stance that America is going to take, I think there is a bigger issue that is not being addressed right now. But I think America is putting itself into a spot in its relationship with various other countries in the developing world where America recognizes, for instance, India as an important element to its pivot to Asia. American foreign policy, I mean, if India then, if this goes to the next level, and this is the first time in a long, long time all of us have seen all political parties in India come together and take this kind of a stand. And if tomorrow push comes to shove, America's relations with India go back to what they were in the 60s and 70s, you will have a lot of strategic loss to bear with. Because we can live without you, but I don't know if America can live without us in the changing dynamics of the world, particularly in Asia.
Right.
Because India feels right now that there are several other issues that have stood to lose out with because we've stood by with the Americans. Look what you've done, tossed us around in Afghanistan. Look what you've done in our relationship with Iran.
Right.
And now you've gone for a rapprochement, and we are going to be at the receiving end. So I think there are many bigger issues that are going to come out of this Pandora's box. And this, as a foreign secretary in India, wrote
gentlemen and the lady
in the
with us,
papers to
you know,
say,
we are running out of time on this debate, Mahroof.
As a foreign secretary
We are running out of time, so quickly wrap up, please.
As the Foreign Secretary said, this has been happening in the past. This has been happening in the past with connivance of consular and visa officials. This is not the first case. Let us put a graceful end to it as soon as possible.
Well, Ambassador Walker, Lord Meghnad Desai, Mr. G. Parthasarthy, Veena Sikri, and of course, Mahroof Raza. Thanks a lot for joining us on this debate on the News Hour.